Dogworks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dogworks. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by First Paw Coffee Company, specializing in private label premium blend coffee. If you're serious about coffee, you should check it out. First Paw Coffee's passion is high-quality, small-batch roasted coffee. They take the extra time to taste and get everything perfect before they release new blends. They aim to bring you a cup of happiness each time you pour yourself some coffee. Find out more at ak.dog/free and enter for a chance to win some First Paw Coffee prizes, a book from our collection, and tote bag. One winner will be selected at random each month. That's ak.dog/free.
From First Paw Media, sponsored by First Paw Coffee Company, this is the Dog Driver Show. Visit our website at dogworksradio.com. Now here are your hosts, Robert Forto and Parto.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Robert and this is the Dog Driver Show, and I am joined by my co-host KP, and today we have a very special guest calling in. He is the current Iditarod Champion, but also a world-class sprinter in his own right. KP, who are we talking to?
Today we have a very, very special guest. His name is Thomas Waerner. Thomas is the 2020 Iditarod Champion, and also something that a lot of people may not know about Thomas is he is a very, very fast and successful sprint open class driver in Europe and also in Alaska. I had the opportunity to have a partnership with him years ago, and that's how we introduced some of the Norwegian bloodlines that we have in our kennel. Thomas, how are you doing?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. It's nice weather, sunshine, and enjoying a day in Alaska.
Thomas, a lot of our listeners are not familiar with your background, at least in the sprint world. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I started dog marching when I was 11 years old, so I'm 47 now. So I have many, many years in dog marching. But I started actually in a club and do more hiking and some long distance, smaller races and stuff. But in 1990 or 89, I went to be a handler at Roger Lagarde and Lila. And then a year after, I went to Roxy Rice and Charlie Champagne and stayed a season there. So, yeah. So it's been many, many years in sprint. I think I had 10 seasons in sprints after that.
So, Thomas, you, as you mentioned, you came to Alaska and handled for Roger, for Roxy and Charlie, and prior to that with Roger Ligard. Tell me a little bit of the dogs that you had in those days and how you created your sprint open class team.
Well, if you look at the dogs that Roxy and Charlie had, I think that's what would be a super long distance team. They're more husky types, but Roger had went into the more hounds already. So half breed, half husky, half porter. And when I got back, I brought two dogs back from Roxy and Charlie, and actually that was the base of my team and making the team together with Oscar and Adolfo. We kind of made the Norwegian Hound with some other kennels.
A lot of the Norwegian hounds that you see, the generations and the generation back, they go to the two dogs you're talking about. Who were those two dogs?
There were two, they won the Rendezvous and Open North American, and there were two dogs in the team when Charlie and Rocky were winning everything, when they were just unbeatable. So I think the foundation we made from getting all these good Alaskan Huskies, also with Oscar buying Whitey and kind of building up his kennel with the Whitey. I think that kind of gave the base, and then we had the performance, high quality porters and pointers also in Norway. So together with those two lines, that's what became after the sprint dogs that are now.
Thomas is right. If Robert, if you look behind a lot of the Eurohounds that we have around the world, like literally around the world, Thomas or Osborne, they have their fingers in some of those backgrounds of the dogs in the distance generation. I know that I have many of those in my kennel. And Thomas, when you raced in open class in Europe, I remember you did a lot of European championships and world championships out there. And then you came to Alaska, as we all know, and you raced here. Actually, anecdote is Thomas has won Eagle River Classic in Chugiak, which is my club, which is super interesting. I see your name on the plaque every time when we have a club meeting. It says Thomas Waerner, Eagle River Classic champion. Not very often would we have an Eagle River Classic champion who is an Iditarod champion, by the way. Tell us a little bit when you moved or you came to Alaska, what you saw different from the racing you had in Norway and in Scandinavia.
Well, I think the trails you have here, it's more, especially open North America, it's more fast. You know, it goes faster, and it's in Norway we used to have a little more hilly, a little slower actually. So the biggest change was actually that wide open sprint that you have with those big teams. That was the biggest difference.
And you made slowly the transition from the sprint open class to the distance. How did you, or why did you decide, being so successful in sprint, to switch to something which is new to you?
Well, it was actually not new because I did a lot of it when I was young, and I always kind of missed those long trips, and I think it was kind of time for me to kind of go back to going more hiking and other things. You know, I live in a place where it's not so good for sprint because I live high up in the mountains. And I always said when I was living there, this is a perfect place for long distance, but not a good place for sprint because, you know, the trails always get blown in off the wind. So it was something I wanted to do, and I had always this dream about Iditarod since I was small, so it was time to go.
How long did it take you to, from a super competitive open class team to have a super competitive distance team?
It took many years. I think the biggest difference is actually in long distance, it's so many other things you have to be good at. You like your mentally yourself, the mentally of the dogs, and the way the dogs are running. You know, in sprint, you kind of, you know, before the start if you have a good team or not. You know, you can really feel that you have done the work, you have the good dogs, you have done all the work and training, and then you're just going to perform that 1.5 hour. In long distance, you kind of meet up on the starting line, and you don't know what you're going to get. You know, you can get bad weather, soft trails, hard trails, cold, warm. So it's so many other things that are getting in. And that was actually one of the hardest things for me from going from sprint to long distance, was kind of to adjust to take away the watch, kind of. You know, you're expecting the race to be this and this way because that's what you train for, and then it shows up to be something different. So that was hard for some while to actually get the mentally on myself good enough and strong enough, and also how to train the dog to actually do it. That was also really different because this is more mentally training in long distance.
Thomas, do you have in current dogs or in the background of some of the champions you have in your team, do you have any of the sprint lines behind that you used to have?
Yes, I have. So one of my base is actually bred up on 3 dogs, and one of those kind of lines is from the sprint dogs. And also the other line is actually a Curtis Earhart dog that Ramy Brooks bought from Curtis, and I bought from Ramy. So that was also a sprint dog, that's sprint husky, more husky type dog that I actually bought. And all my dogs have fork in them. I mean, so all my dogs are kind of bred from sprint. And also, but I think the most important is more the principle of how you're going to make the open class sprint team. And I do that exactly the same thing did when I had an open class team in sprint that I'm doing in long distance. You know, the way they are going to look, the way they are running, how efficient they are they able to recover? You know, all the small things you're looking for in sprint, you're also looking for in long distance.
It is very interesting. Yesterday, I was on the phone actually with another Iditarod champion from Norway, with Jor Ulsen, and we were chatting about, because we're all friends, chatting about Thomas's performance. And I asked Jor, I said, do you think Thomas being a super competitive sprint musher, did it help him to be a winner in the distance circuit? And he said, absolutely, absolutely, I believe so. Thomas, do you believe that your sprint background helped you?
Yes, I think so, because in sprint you're so focused on the details and you're so focused on making everything perfect. So I think a lot of people in long distance, they come from hiking or other things, and it's hard for them to be so focused on details. But I know what can go. If one snap breaks during a sprint race, and that guy starts going around, you have to stop, and your race is maybe you're going from first place to third place. So all these small details and all the focus. But I also think the most important from sprint is that how to build a team. How to make the team efficient, how to see how they are running, and all those things. I think we have a lot to learn to the long distance people actually from the sprint.
It is so true what he says, Robert. I mean, attention to detail for these guys, and I think Thomas is he's so detail oriented. I remember when he came to Alaska for the first time, and we hosted him, and he was very, very meticulous with his efforts, with his drop times, with his feeding schedule, training schedule, and racing schedule, and I think that gives him a huge edge over his competition. Usually we don't talk about this, but tell me a little bit about your Iditarod race this year.
Well, it was a strange race with a lot of different weather. Actually, we're from really loose trails to hard trails to really cold to really warm. So it was a race with a lot of obstacles. Yeah, well, difficult. You have to kind of manage. So it was a good race for me, because that's normally when I do best. It's when the weather is not so good and the trail is not so hard. That's when I do best.
And traveling with the dogs to Alaska, how was it? Was it more difficult this time, or was it more difficult the time you came back in the early 2000s?
Well, in the 2000s was easy before we had that, the 9/11, because then we just went to a cargo plane and you jumped on the cargo plane yourself, and you were 8 hours later you were in Alaska. Now you have to bring 4 dogs with 4 persons to actually go there. So it's a little fun to say. I actually, before the race, I said, if I just get myself and the dog over to Alaska before the start, going home will not be a problem. Then we have time. So yeah. That's a little strange when we are in May now, and I'm still here.
So for listeners who are not familiar with the situation that Thomas is in, is the guy, he wins Iditarod. He's the world champion in the biggest race in the world, Iditarod, and he cannot go back home because the pandemic, the corona pandemic, and he is in Fairbanks still several months after he won, and his family is by themselves still in Norway. It's every day is a day, right?
Oh yeah, but I have really good friends there, so I'm kind of lucky that you have so many people. So I'm living with one of the champions in sprints actually, Ali Reynolds and his family. So it's been great actually catching up with friends and doing things. But it's time to go home to my family. And the Guru has a lot of work with the kids and 35 dogs and everything. So hopefully I'll get on the plane in a couple of weeks now.
So, Thomas, let's explore this a little bit further if we can. You are one of the first few of the interviews we've done on the show after the coronavirus and the pandemic. So I have a couple of ways I would like to go with this. My first question to you is, in the middle of Iditarod is really when this hit, and they started closing checkpoints and all that stuff along the trail. How did that affect a long distance race as you were traveling? Did you really feel the effects of it, or did you just kind of show up and say, okay, this is just another obstacle that we have to face?
Well, I think if you're going to be a good long distance runner, you have to be able to kind of put things on side. You're getting all these negative things coming against you, weather, corona and everything, and you have to kind of just put it on side and don't think about it if you're going to perform. Because one really important part in long distance is to be happy yourself, and that I don't mean you have to really feel that you're okay, because that will affect the performance on dogs really hard. If you're in a bad mood or start worrying or thinking too much, your speed and your performance will go down. So, but I started to get messages in my inReach, and they were saying Finnmark race is shut down. They couldn't go to the finish line, and I said, "Whoa! I hope it's not happening here. That they will stop the race." So that was actually the only thought I had. That I hope we can go to Nome.
It was interesting to watch as a fan, for sure. We were doing the Serum Run expedition at about the same time you guys were starting the Iditarod, and we were facing some of that as well, where they were closing up some of the villages and things. So I know exactly what you're talking about there. Thomas, the next question is going to be in relation to traveling back to Norway. You had talked about staying with friends up in Fairbanks, and before air, you were talking about having to charter a plane to fly back to get back, and it's an interesting story, but it also goes back to what you were just saying about before 9/11, you could easily just jump on a cargo plane and fly over. That's almost what you're doing now, isn't it?
Well, it's actually a really unique story, because Everest Air Cargo is actually is owning one of the oldest and first airline planes in Norway that the company called Broughton Safe, who doesn't exist anymore, used to have. That was the first plane they had, and they were going overseas and stuff. So, and a museum in Norway is buying the plane from Robert Everest, and he's gonna fly it to Norway. So I'm happy I can actually join him.
And you're just going to jump on there and go, which is interesting in this time and in this day of travel restrictions and all. Which brings up to my last question on this subject, Thomas, is how do you think that this pandemic is going to affect us in the future? What do you think is going to happen next year in open racing and in Iditarod and things like that? Do you think we're going to see a much different world in our sport, or is it going to be much the same?
Well, I think if you talk about the long distance, I think a lot of the people that are doing long distance also are doing tours things. So it will definitely be some mushers that have to kind of step down maybe and make money, actually. So I think we will probably see some less mushers, but I think race will go on. I think Iditarod has been through a lot of things before, and I think they will manage to do it. So the only thing I'm worrying about is if the villages are still closed, how they're gonna kind of make the race. But I know they're pretty tough, the people making that Iditarod, so they will find a way to make the race.
Yes, and hopefully everybody's allowed to resume travel and all that. I'm going to turn it back over to KP. We have a few minutes left.
Before I switch back to sprint questions, one thing Thomas said just piqued my attention, and I'm going to go back to that. You mentioned that when you were racing Iditarod, you heard that Finnmark race was canceled, and you were hoping to be able to make it to Nome. Is that why you pushed and you got ahead of the race just in case if they cancel it?
Oh, not really. That was actually my plan to take a long run to the coast there. So that was actually, I had pre-planned that I had it just because of the weather. It got so warm, and my dogs are pretty furry. So I had to kind of adjust a little in the weather for the weather conditions. But my plan was to take some long runs on the coast there.
Getting back on the sprint, in the sprint world and the previous life that you had in the sprint, when you raced your dogs in the open class, how did you train them? Did you train them at the distance of the race? Did you train them shorter, longer? What was your training regiment?
It's the principle for my training in long distance and open class sprint. It's the same. I train 5 days a week. I like to go 3 days in a row in the weekend. So you go Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I always like to go 3 days, and then they have 1 day off on Monday, and then I train short on Tuesday and Wednesday. So in the weekends, I maybe go a little longer, but I never go like we are racing. And I don't like to do that in sprint area. I did it some seasons, and then I thought, you were just taking too much out of the dogs because you were they were actually going too fast in training to actually perform in the races. So my principle of training is the same, and I don't train that much. A lot of long distance people are training a lot of miles. I don't do that. I'm more getting the dogs up in shape, and I think that's pretty easy to get the dogs up in the physical shape, and then it's more giving them the mental training, so I know they can do everything we can, every type of weather or conditions.
When you were training and racing your open class, of course you did a lot of breeding also, and as I said, I have several of those dogs in the background of mine. What were you looking for quality of dog that you were breeding?
Well, you're actually down to one of the questions that are important difference in long distance, because in sprint, especially in the open class, you know, some dogs can make it, and some dogs are just not able to go, 18, 20 miles an hour for 20, 25, 30 miles. It's just not possible for them to do it. And you can train as much as you want, they will never make it. In long distance, you can actually take the dog and train it to be good.
Thomas, also one thing I want to talk about is the team that you're in, the Krill pet food team. There are several, world-class drivers part of that team. Tell me a little bit about the conception of this team and this program.
Well, what we want to do with the team and the coupons and everything is actually make the sport greater and have more people to see this great sport also in sprint. This is not only a long distance thing. This is for canicross or sprints or just working with dogs. What the sponsor, who is Aker, who has the Kroll product, is doing is actually, looking to raise dog health and dog welfare, and also the awareness of the sport. So I think we have kind of a new partner with them, and together with other people I have in the team, like Dallas and Joar and Marit and Hanna, it's the kind of thing we can actually make the sport better. So that's our goal, actually, to make the awareness of the sport and show people the great sport we are doing.
And do you have input for the quality of the dog food that Krill producing for you guys?
Yeah, we have in my dog food, my dry food, I have the Krill already in the dry food. So it's a very good supplement for the dogs and gives you a lot of omega-3 acids and antioxidants that you need. So it's very good.
And talking about short-term and long-term objectives that you have, what are your plans for next year?
Well, next year is the famous race, and then I go back to Iditarod. And the year after, I will focus on Yukon Quest. I think that's what I'm thinking about now. So I will do Yukon Quest, try to perform hard there, and then I'll also do the Iditarod.
And you can tell you've done it all. You kind of done from Open North American Championship to Rendezvous to Iditarod and to Yukon Quest. That's pretty impressive. Very, very impressive.
Then you've done it all.
Yeah, exactly. You've done it all. Any sponsors you want to thank? Anyone in particular who assisted you in your career?
Well, I want to thank Roxy and Charlie and Roger, and I'll actually all the people that have been around me for many, many years. Oscar Adlose, that's been a big mentor and helping me a lot. So, we have so many great people in the sport, and that's I think that's why we are doing this sport and why we just keep on going every year. When you see it's kind of strange that we never stop, but it is a great sport, and of course, sponsors are really important. Without sponsors, it's not possible for me to do this sport. So that's important.
Excellent. Thomas, thank you very much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you on and taking time. And good luck in your travels back to Norway. Hopefully all that is done with very few problems for sure. KP, thanks for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to be on with you, and we will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
This episode of the podcast is sponsored by First Paw Coffee Company. Learn more at firstpaw.coffee.
From First Paw Media, this is the Dog Driver Show. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you can see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Robert Forto and Parto. Our producer is Robert Forto and created for First Paw Media. You can support this podcast on patreon.com/Teamaneke. Did you know that Alaska Dog Works trains service dogs for those in need throughout North America? Each and every service dog that is trained through the Lead Dog Service Dog Program and Michelle Forto and her team has an individual training plan. We train for autistic, mobility, psychiatric, and PTSD for our soldiers for service work. If you know of someone that may need a service dog, please take a moment and check out Alaska Dog Works on social media and at alaskadogworks.com.